What the hell are you still doing in this room? Clean up the trash and get your ghetto hands off those folders immediately. You people always think a uniform gives you the right to nose around where millions of dollars are changing hands. I am sorry, sir. I was just making sure the internal audit drafts were sorted for the board meeting. Sorted? Do not play corporate games with me, boy. Mailroom boys do not analyze complex sovereign debt restructurings. You probably cannot even balance your own checkbook. Now, get out of this penthouse suite before I have building security drag you out by your collar. Julian Vance's hand gripped Marcus's shoulder with a brutal, public force that felt less like an eviction and more like handling a stray animal. Senior partner Sterling's executive assistant walked past the open glass doors, holding a tray of iced espresso. She saw the entire humiliation flash before her eyes. She kept walking. Marcus held a crumpled, water-stained internal memo in his left hand, a memo that explicitly stated the firm was seeking urgent forensic assistance on an unresolvable transaction discrepancy. Nobody looked twice at the skinny 19-year-old black kid in the oversized navy blue courier polo shirt. Inside the main boardroom, 12 senior financial analysts and 3 federal defense attorneys surrounded a leather-bound restructuring ledger worth $450 million. This was an ancient financial matrix of hidden shell company assets, completely impossible to decode. The final mathematical truth was in the hands of the boy they had just publicly degraded. Have you ever completely dismissed a human being's intellectual potential before they even opened their mouth to speak? The armored courier truck arrived at the loading dock at precisely 7:15 in the morning. Marcus slipped through the freight elevator doors while Vance was preoccupied shouting at a logistics manager about a late shipment of legal documents. He followed the voices, sharp, strained, and filled with immense frustration, echoing down the corridor of the 44th floor. The heavy mahogany door of the conference suite stood exactly halfway open. Marcus stopped dead in his tracks in the shadow of the doorway. 12 people crowded around a massive digital display screen. Scholars of Wall Street finance in $3,000 bespoke suits. 3 faces from London and Tokyo flickered on the high-definition video screens. Everyone was staring at a single column of forensic transaction logs under the stark glare of the fluorescent lighting. The ledger looked chaotic, dark, filled with nested offshore accounts and encrypted mathematical algorithms that seemed to dance aggressively on the monitor. We have exactly 48 hours before the SEC Enforcement Division arrives at this office. The woman speaking had sharp silver hair and severe exhaustion etched into the lines around her dark eyes. This was Senior Managing Partner Eleanor Sterling. Her voice carried the devastating weight of someone who had completely stopped sleeping 3 weeks ago. This single sovereign debt contract determines the survival of a $450 million hedge fund investment. A younger junior partner, an expensive platinum Rolex gleaming under the spotlight, leaned closer to the monitor. Eleanor, the transaction routing numbers do not match any known Federal Reserve transaction clearing protocols we have cataloged in the system. I can see that clearly, Julian. Her jaw tightened to a razor-thin line. On the largest video screen, a forensic accounting expert with thick glasses spoke from Chicago. Dr. Bradford Lowe. Eleanor, I have run this data matrix through every single quantitative software database available in North America. The accounting syntax is completely irregular. It is as if they invented their own private commercial shorthand to hide the money trail. Another voice crackled from the London feed. Could be a complete fabrication. It is not a fabrication. Eleanor's cold tone abruptly ended that discussion. The wire transfers date back to a specific mid-90s liquidation. We have confirmed the funds exist. We just cannot track which shell company holds the primary lien. An absolute, suffocating silence filled the room. The kind of terrifying silence that costs entire careers and ends empires. Marcus's eyes moved slowly across the digital screen. His lips moved silently, reading. The chaotic numbers made sense, perfect mathematical sense, like reading his own name on a page. It was not a standard accounting matrix. It was a highly specialized municipal bond structure mixed with legacy offshore maritime legal abbreviations. The exact kind of hidden financial architecture corrupt shipping merchants used along the Caribbean trade routes in the late 20th century. He had read about this exact transaction structure in a rare tax law manual 3 years ago, page 182. He could still see the faded text in his mind. Chloe, the executive assistant, glanced toward the heavy mahogany door. She saw him standing there. Security. Her voice cut through the tense room like a knife. There is someone. Marcus did not hesitate. The words just came out of his mouth. It is not an offshore routing error. It is a dual-tier municipal structure hidden inside a maritime legal shorthand. Every single head in that room turned instantly. They saw a skinny black kid in a stained mailroom uniform, 19 years old, standing in a room where his social status dictated he absolutely did not belong. The room went dead silent. Not the comfortable silence of corporate thinking. The shocked, paralyzed silence of a broken social hierarchy. Bradford Lowe leaned toward his camera lens in Chicago. That is actually theoretically possible. But that is a random guess from someone who his eyes traveled up and down Marcus's frame. The worn-out sneakers, the too big polo shirt, the way the kid stood like he was ready to face a firing squad. Someone completely untrained. Who what, Bradford? Eleanor's voice had a dangerous edge to it. Lowe backpedaled immediately. Someone without formal Ivy League credentials. Julian Vance, the younger partner, crossed his tailored sleeves. Eleanor, how did this mailroom kid even bypass the security desk down there? I am standing right here. Marcus's voice was quiet, steady. I can hear you. Eleanor turned around slowly. Her sharp eyes met Marcus's. Assessing, cold, but not entirely dismissive. How old are you, son? 19, Mom. Murmurs rippled through the 12 analysts. Someone laughed in the back. A cruel, condescending laugh. 19? Julian repeated with a sneer. This is what we are doing now, Eleanor. Listening to teenagers off the street who empty our trash bins. Where did you learn about maritime trade structures and dual-tier municipal bonds? Eleanor ignored Julian completely. Marcus shifted his weight from one worn shoe to the other. I read about it, in a book. Which book? Lawson's Comparative Analysis of Sovereign Debt Deflection. The city library kept it in the restricted reference basement. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. That text was doctoral level. Dense. Most corporate lawyers struggled to comprehend its logic. You read Lawson? Yes, Mom. The entire book? Yes, Mom. Another senior partner, an older woman with sharp pearl earrings and a cold expression, shook her head in pure disbelief. Eleanor, this is absolutely absurd. We are wasting critical executive hours on a complete farce. But Eleanor kept her focus locked entirely on Marcus. Can you actually read the underlying structural data of this document? Julian Vance stepped forward, his leather shoes clicking sharply on the polished marble floor. Eleanor, we cannot seriously allow a low-level manual worker to touch federal evidence. I asked him a direct question, Julian. Her cutting tone could have frozen water instantly. Marcus, can you decipher this transaction log? Marcus's hand trembled slightly as he slowly approached the glass-encased digital command table. The sterile scent of the boardroom hit him immediately. Expensive cologne, fresh printing toner, the invisible aroma of absolute financial power. His worn-out sneakers squeaked loudly against the pristine marble. Too loud. Everyone in the room heard the sound clearly. The other analysts stepped back in unison, creating a physical distance between themselves and the boy, as if he carried an infectious disease. His long finger hovered over the high-definition glass display. being exceptionally careful not to leave a fingerprint on the surface. Line 14. His voice was barely above a sharp whisper. It says, between the Clearinghouse of Maritime Commerce and the primary legal trustees of Apex Logistics. Dr. Bradford Lowe started typing frantically on his mechanical keyboard in Chicago. Wait. Stop. His face went completely pale on the video monitor. The hidden subclause we already verified through 3 separate audits the primary trustee's name. He is right. How on earth is he right? A younger female analyst pulled up the archived corporate charter texts on her tablet, scrolling through pages of data with immense speed. Marcus continued, speaking without a single break. It is a debt shield agreement. They are using an obsolete, abbreviated numerical syntax. Traders along the Caribbean routing networks used these specific numerical shortcuts to hide taxable interest from federal regulators. See this specific alphanumeric symbol? He pointed directly to a complex mark everyone in the room had assumed was an encrypted software formatting glitch. That specific indicator means the fund is fully guaranteed by physical assets currently in maritime transit. The senior partner with the pearl earrings leaned in closer, studying the tiny digital symbol with intense concentration. Her expression changed completely. My God, that is not a software formatting error at all. Eleanor Sterling removed her designer reading glasses, cleaned them slowly with a silk cloth, put them back on, and looked at the display screen. Then she looked directly at Marcus. What is your full name, son? Marcus Vance. Mom, no relation to Julian. Where did you study forensic accounting and corporate maritime law, Marcus? I did not study anywhere, Mom. I just read. A lot. Where are your legal parents? The personal question hit Marcus like a physical blow to the chest. His eyes dropped immediately to the floor. His lower jaw tightened. Eleanor saw the subtle flinch. She saw the deep, hidden pain. She did not push him for an answer. Instead, she slid another encrypted printout across the massive mahogany table. This is a legacy ledger from a Panamanian trust. A completely different mathematical encryption system. What about this one? Marcus looked down. His eyes moved across the dense lines of numbers and characters. Fast. A hidden corporate tax receipt. 26th fiscal year of the original offshore holding corporation. The primary taxpayer is officially lodging a formal complaint about the hidden tariff assessment rate. He claims the provincial maritime administrator is taking bribes under the table. A junior analyst laughed, a nervous, high-pitched, uncomfortable laugh. Another senior lawyer looked like he might be physically sick right there. Julian pulled out his personal phone. He started researching frantically, trying to fact-check a 19-year-old mailroom boy in real time. Dr. Bradford Lowe's distorted voice came through the high-end conference room speakers. Eleanor, I do not understand what is happening in that room right now, but that legacy Panamanian translation. I just cross-referenced the encryption key manually. He is accurate, completely, 100% accurate. Someone in the back whispered, He is just a courier kid. Marcus heard the words. Everyone in that room heard the words. Eleanor's voice cut through the corporate chatter like a razor blade. He is a kid who just accomplished what 12 of our highest-paid Ivy League analysts could not do in 3 weeks. She looked at Marcus. Really looked at him. It was like she was seeing his true human form for the very first time. Where do you sleep at night, Marcus? The heavy question hung in the air. Heavy, uncomfortable, suffocating. Marcus did not answer. He did not need to answer. Everyone in that luxury boardroom suddenly understood why his uniform polo shirt was 2 sizes too big. They understood why his sneakers were completely worn through to the soles. They understood exactly why he had been waiting on the dark loading dock at the crack of dawn. Eleanor asked the single question everyone was desperately trying to avoid. Where do you sleep, Marcus? The simple words pulled his mind backward. 3 long years, to the time when his chaotic life still made absolute sense. The public library on 42nd Street.
That was where his universe began.
Marcus was 16 when his mother passed away. Aggressive leukemia. Fast. Exactly 3 months from the initial diagnosis to the quiet funeral.
His father was already completely out of the picture.
Sentenced to a 10-year term in a maximum security federal facility for a financial crime he swore he never committed.
No successful legal appeals.
No wealthy family members to take in a black teenager nobody wanted. Foster care lasted precisely 2 miserable months.
The primary foster family was nice enough to him.
But their biological son was vicious. And when valuable electronics went missing from the house, everyone automatically believed the foster kid did it. Marcus learned the brutal rules of the world incredibly fast. When you are young, black, desperately poor, and not really theirs, you are always the easiest answer for everything.
He ran away into the night.
The public library became his sanctuary. Open until 9 o'clock. Warm, completely safe, full of brilliant books that never judged his clothing or his skin color.
Mrs. Gable noticed his presence first.
The kind librarian in her late 60s who had worked the reference desk for over 30 years. She saw him memorizing dense financial textbooks, entire pages, word for word. You possess hyperlexia, do you not? She did not ask the question loud enough for the other patrons to hear.
A photographic memory.
Marcus nodded silently. What do you genuinely enjoy reading, Marcus? Everything. But I really love the old legal codes and financial matrix structures.
The dead ones.
Mrs. Gable's maternal expression softened completely. Why the dead ones, son? Because they cannot judge your background.
They just exist on the paper.
They are beautiful, orderly, and nobody uses them to tell you that you are not good enough for this world. 27 advanced forensic accounting texts lived in that library's restricted collection. Marcus read them all, some twice. The complex ledger patterns stayed in his head like high-resolution photographs.
Perfect recall,
Every routing system, every mathematical algorithm, every corporate footnote. Financial structures made sense. They had rules, patterns, ironclad logic, completely unlike the cruel world that took his mother and father, and any chance at a normal life.
Then the library closed down.
Extensive structural renovations, unexpected city budget cuts.
Temporary, the notices said. 6 months.
Maybe much more. Marcus lost his only sanctuary. 6 long months of freezing subway platforms, museum steps, and crowded shelter beds when they were available. Always moving, always exactly one aggressive security guard away from another bitter confrontation. He kept only one book, water-damaged, its spine completely broken, a bright discard stamp in red ink on the cover.
Introduction to Sovereign Matrix Systems.
Some nights when sleep would not come, he would read it by the harsh glow of a streetlight. The exact same pages, over and over, remembering when he actually had a place that wanted him. Now, he stood in a high-end boardroom full of elite analysts who had attended the best Ivy League universities, who had wealthy families and luxury homes and premium health insurance, and he could easily read what they could not. Eleanor Sterling made her executive decision in precisely 3 seconds. I need you to stay in this room. Help us finish this forensic investigation. The junior partner, Julian Vance, still stood by the doorway, his arms tightly crossed over his chest. Eleanor, is this wise? He is just a courier kid who bypassed security. She did not even look back at him. He is significantly more qualified than half the people sitting in this room. I will take full corporate responsibility. Chloe, the executive assistant who had avoided Marcus that morning, finally spoke up. But he is legally a minor, or barely 19. We need official corporate clearance for any external consultant.
Liability issues with federal evidence.
Then I will establish him as an independent contractor under my personal authority for today. Eleanor's severe tone allowed absolutely no further argument.
Get the paperwork done now.
She turned back to Marcus. Are you hungry, son?
He hesitated for a brief moment, then nodded quietly.
Chloe, order food, whatever he wants from the catering menu. She pulled a spare branded corporate blazer from the executive closet, an adult size. It hung remarkably loose on Marcus's thin, undernourished frame. You work for this firm now, temporarily. We will figure out the long-term details later. She set a fresh bottle of premium water and a clean notepad directly in front of him, giving him a dedicated space at the mahogany table between two senior analysts who looked exactly like they had just swallowed broken glass. The low hum of the high-definition display monitors filled the absolute silence. Pencils scratched aggressively as wealthy people took notes from a 19-year-old mailroom boy. The utter absurdity of the situation was not lost on anyone in the room. Marcus's voice grew steadier as he read the data line by line. The hidden contract slowly revealed itself, a complex agreement between a shell merchant and a foreign maritime trust, transportation of untaxed capital, heavy penalties for transaction breach, hidden insurance clauses, and specific witness requirements. His long finger traced the digital symbols, never touching the glass, just following the numbers like reading a simple bedtime story. This specific subclause here specifies the exact wire transfer timeline, 30 days from the close of the fiscal quarter, primary payment rendered in silver-backed assets, verified by 3 independent offshore trustees. Dr. Bradford Lowe leaned into his camera lens from Chicago. The historical transaction records from the mid-90s fully support this. The maritime trust trade was incredibly common in that specific period. Julian whispered to another senior analyst. Not quiet enough.
This is completely embarrassing for the firm.
We are trusting our entire corporate survival to a street kid. Eleanor heard the comment clearly. Julian, either contribute meaningfully to this audit or leave the suite immediately.
Your choice.
Julian went completely silent, but his dark expression said everything.
Then Marcus stopped dead.
Line 88, a completely different financial script woven into the primary matrix. This section, I need a full minute.
What is it? Eleanor asked, leaning forward.
An obsolete legacy European tariff code. I have only seen it once in one rare text.
Let me.
He closed his eyes completely. The entire room watched him, some deeply skeptical, some intensely curious, all completely uncomfortable. Marcus's fingers moved slowly in the air, tracing invisible text lines. His lips moved silently, recalling dense pages he had read years ago in the dark. Exactly 90 seconds passed. It felt like hours to the executives. His eyes snapped open. It is a secondary verification clause. It requires 3 specific signatures from a foreign trade partner. Proves the agreement crossed maritime regulatory boundaries. The senior partner, with the pearl earrings, pulled up historical financial codes on her tablet, scrolling fast.
Her eyes widened.
European tariff witness protocols were standard for high-value offshore contracts crossing regional jurisdictions in 1994. This is absolutely correct. Dr. Bradford Lowe's distorted voice crackled through the high-end speaker system. How old were you when you read about obsolete European tariff codes, kid?
16.
Someone made a sharp sound in the back, half a laugh, half absolute disbelief. You memorized a doctoral book about obsolete European tariff codes at 16? Another analyst's voice carried pure, unadulterated skepticism. I do not try to memorize anything. It just stays in my head. Eleanor's personal phone buzzed aggressively. She glanced down at the illuminated screen. Her expression tightened instantly. The hedge fund's primary managing director wants a full update right now. She looked at Marcus, the kid, who had been threatened with eviction 2 hours ago, who was now translating a financial document worth $450 million.
I need to tell him something definitive.
Are you absolutely certain about this transaction path? Marcus met her sharp eyes directly. Yes, Mom, I am completely certain. She nodded slowly, stood up and smoothed her tailored corporate blazer. Then that is exactly what I will tell him. She walked toward the heavy mahogany door, stopped and turned back to face the table. Do not let anyone in this room make you feel small while I am gone. The door closed behind her with a heavy, final thud. Marcus sat at the head of the massive table, surrounded by elite corporate analysts with decades of practical experience and expensive Ivy League degrees. And they were all completely silent, waiting for a 19-year-old mailroom boy to tell them what came next. The firm's executive boardroom was a vast space of sheer glass and polished leather, offering panoramic city views of the Manhattan skyline and decorated with exceptionally expensive contemporary art. Richard Holloway, the primary managing director of the entire hedge fund, sat at the absolute head of the table. 62 years old, white, wearing a $3,000 bespoke suit, he was a man completely accustomed to absolute corporate control. Your definitive source is a teenage mailroom courier? His booming voice carried pure, unadulterated disbelief and something significantly sharper, disgust. Eleanor, a 19-year-old black kid off the street who empties our trash bins? Eleanor Sterling kept her spine completely straight against the leather chair. My source is someone who can easily read financial and legal matrix structures that your entire highly paid staff cannot decode. The public optics, Eleanor. He leaned back in his executive chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. A child, absolutely no formal credentials, living on the streets or in temporary shelters. What if he is running some kind of elaborate corporate con on us? What if you are being played by a teenager?
Played into what, Richard?
Eleanor's cold voice went even colder. Accurate forensic accounting translations that have already been verified manually by 3 independent PhD linguists and analysts. The other board members watched the confrontation through the high-definition video screens, completely silent, judging the situation. Patricia Vance, the museum and firm's primary external legal consultant, shook her head in disapproval. Expensive blonde highlights caught the harsh glare of the boardroom lights. Eleanor, we cannot seriously present this data to the Federal Enforcement Delegation. The primary translator is a legal minor or a low-level worker with no standing. Where are his legal parents? Who is legally responsible for this firm if something goes terribly wrong with the SEC? 3 separate independent experts have already confirmed every single line of data he has decoded. Confirmed based entirely on his initial reading. Patricia's tone sharpened to a razor edge. What if he is completely wrong?
What if this whole thing is an elaborate fraud?
An elaborate what, Patricia? Eleanor stood up, her chair scraping sharply against the floor. A con? By a desperate child who can barely afford to buy a single meal? We have our global corporate reputation to consider, Eleanor, and he has his entire human life to consider. His future. His one real chance at survival. Holloway stood up slowly, walked over to the massive glass window, and looked out over the sprawling city like a king, surveying his vast kingdom. You are genuinely willing to stake your entire corporate career on a 19-year-old homeless boy? Yes. Your executive tenure, your personal reputation, 20 years of hard work in this firm?
Yes.
For a kid you met at the loading dock this morning? For accuracy, Richard. For the absolute truth. For not letting deep-seated prejudice decide who gets to be brilliant in this society. A suffocating silence stretched across the boardroom, uncomfortable, heavy. Another senior board member spoke up from the video feed, an older man with a distinct Boston accent. Eleanor, even if the boy is completely right, he is a child from the streets, a deeply troubled child. The federal delegation will see this as highly unprofessional.
Desperate.
The delegation will see definitive results, Gerald. From a black teenager who was almost evicted from this very building. The brutal words hung heavily in the air. Everyone in that room heard exactly what he did not say aloud.
The cruel assumption underneath the statement.
Eleanor's jaw tightened to a razor-thin line. Say exactly what you mean, Gerald. I mean, corporate optics matter, Eleanor. Public perception matters immensely to our investors. We cannot simply trust him. You mean you cannot trust a black child to be what he has already proven he is?
Brilliant.
Gerald's face flushed a deep, angry red on the monitor. That is absolutely not what I meant. That is exactly what you meant, Gerald. Holloway turned away from the window, his expression grim.
This discussion is officially over.
We will revisit the data tomorrow morning. Eleanor, I strongly suggest you find a more traditional, credentialed solution to this crisis before the SC arrives. Outside the main boardroom, Marcus sat quietly on a leather bench, close enough to hear the muffled voices, but not the exact words. He could hear the sharp tone of anger, the dismissal, the fierce arguments about his worth, not with him. Chloe sat nearby, scrolling through her phone. She glanced over at him briefly, then looked away. They do not mean it personally, she said quietly, not looking up from her screen.
Yes, they do.
Marcus's voice was flat, completely empty of emotion. I am used to it. Used to what? Being completely invisible until I am suddenly useful, then being too risky to trust the moment the stakes get high.
He stood up from the bench.
It is always the exact same thing, every single time. He walked slowly toward the elevator doors. Chloe watched him go, a sudden flicker of intense guilt crossing her face. The memory of that morning flashed in her mind, pulling her expensive designer bag away from him, walking right past his humiliation without stopping.
The elevator dinged loudly.
Eleanor Sterling burst through the boardroom doors, seeing Marcus waiting for the metal doors to slide open. Do not go, Marcus. He did not turn around to face her. Marcus, please stay. I am just making things worse for you here, ma'am. I always make things worse for people. She reached the elevator bank and stood right beside him, not blocking his path, just being present. You are not making anything worse, son. Their fear is their own problem. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, an empty car waiting inside.
Neither of them moved.
Eleanor pulled out her personal corporate access card and pressed it firmly into his hand. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock sharp. We present the decoded matrix directly to the Federal Enforcement Delegation. What if I mess up the number? I am just a kid from the streets. She bent down slightly, bringing her sharp eyes perfectly level with his, the way a protective mother would. You are not just anything, Marcus.
You are extraordinary.
His eyes filled with tears. He blinked hard to clear his vision. I need you here tomorrow morning.
But only if you choose to come back on your own terms.
The elevator doors closed slowly, the empty car departing. Marcus looked down at the sleek plastic card in his hand. Eleanor Sterling, Senior Managing Partner, Sovereign Restructuring Division. Someone in that massive city finally saw him.
Really saw his humanity.
The only remaining question was whether he was brave enough to show up and face them all again. At exactly 7:55 in the morning, Marcus stood outside the towering glass facade of the Financial District skyscraper. He wore the same worn-out sneakers, his hair quickly combed with water in a cold subway station bathroom. Eleanor Sterling was already waiting for him inside the polished lobby, holding 2 large premium shopping bags containing youth corporate attire, with the price tags still attached. You are an independent financial consultant now, Marcus, so it is time you dress the part. The pristine marble bathroom mirror showed him someone entirely different, a young man in a tailored button-down shirt and charcoal pants that actually fit his frame. This was his first set of new clothes in 18 months, and as he touched the stiff fabric of the collar, he tried desperately not to cry. At precisely 8:15, 3 sleek Blacktown cars arrived at the curb. The Federal Enforcement Delegation, serious men in tailored charcoal suits and a lead investigator wearing a dark navy hijab, carried their legal authority like weapons. Lead SEC investigator Julian Vance's father, Arthur Vance, led them into the building, his sharp eyes missing absolutely nothing. Eleanor, I trust your firm has definitive answers for this discrepancy. Significant structural progress has been made, Arthur. The main executive conference room was thick with tension. and the invisible weight of millions of dollars. Eleanor presented the preliminary forensic findings, mapping out the dual-tier structure, the transaction dates, and the shell company entities. Arthur Vance listened intently, nodding slowly, but revealing absolutely nothing on his face.
Impressive work, Eleanor.
He opened his leather briefcase and slid a fresh document across the table. We brought a complimentary encrypted transaction fragment from a parallel European account, and we require simultaneous verification right now. Our federal analysts will read the encryption in Washington. Yours will read it here. And if the numbers align perfectly, we proceed with the restructuring settlement.
He looked directly at the video screen.
Dr. Bradford Lowe, are you ready? Actually, Eleanor stood up, her voice commanding the entire room. Our lead forensic analyst is present in this room. She gestured directly toward Marcus. The room froze instantly as everyone stared. Arthur Vance's expression changed from professional calm to utter disbelief. This is a teenager, Eleanor. This is Marcus Vance, 19, and he is the sole reason we are having this conversation. The junior partner, Julian Vance, whispered sharply to his father in the back, his tone filled with disgust. Why are we wasting critical federal time with a mailroom boy? Marcus understood every single word, but he kept his composure and said nothing. Arthur Vance studied Marcus for a long moment. You translated the primary dual-tier structure? Yes, sir. At 19? Yes, sir. Convenient, Arthur muttered, with absolutely no warmth in his tone. The SEC's chief forensic accountant, Sylvia Sterling, unrelated to Eleanor, set up her advanced decryption software. 43 years old, with 2 decades of elite federal experience, she glanced at Marcus as if he were a child playing dress-up. Shall we begin the verification? Both documents were immediately projected onto the massive digital screens. Sylvia began the audit, her voice flowing smoothly, professional, and completely unshakable. Marcus followed her pace in English, his voice younger but entirely accurate. In the name of the Maritime Clearinghouse, witnessed by the primary trustees, payment rendered in silver-backed assets, weighed and verified.
Perfect.
Line-by-line synchronization. Same dates, same shell names, same exact financial terms. At subclause 88, both of them stopped abruptly. Sylvia switched her focus to the physical text. This section references. Marcus finished her sentence without hesitation. A third-party European tariff witness, we identified the protocol yesterday afternoon.
She stared at him in absolute shock.
You know obsolete European tariff witness protocols? Yes, Mom, it is standard cross-regional trade structure for that era. Where exactly did you study forensic accounting, young man? Books, Mom, public library reference books. Is the verification wrong? She removed her reading glasses, cleaned them slowly, and put them back on. No, it is museum quality, completely accurate. A long, suffocating pause filled the room. From library books? Yes, ma'am. Arthur Vance watched this extraordinary exchange, silent, deeply assessing. His junior attaché spoke up, his loud voice meant to be heard by everyone. Are we genuinely trusting a federal restructuring agreement to a kid from the streets? Sylvia turned around, her eyes sharp. We are trusting absolute mathematical accuracy, which this young man has just provided. She looked at Marcus, completely devoid of doubt.
Your reading is correct. Completely correct.
The sudden validation hit Marcus like oxygen after drowning. His hands shook violently under the mahogany table, but his voice stayed perfectly steady.
Thank you, Mom.
Arthur Vance stood up abruptly. 30-minute recess, everyone out. Sylvia approached Marcus the moment the room cleared. How many financial encryption systems have you taught yourself, Marcus? 7 legacy systems, a few modern algorithmic structures. At 19?
Yes, Mom.
She handed him her official business card. Department of Forensic Accounting, Federal Enforcement Division. When you turn 21, contact my office directly for formal corporate sponsorship.
She paused, looking at him.
Colleague to colleague. That single word, colleague. Nobody had ever called him that in his entire life. The federal delegation returned from the recess, their faces completely unreadable. Arthur Vance took his seat. We need immediate clarification on the primary translator's formal credentials.
An absolute silence fell over the room, heavy, waiting for a mistake. Eleanor stood up, her spine straight.
Marcus is 19 years old. He has no formal Ivy League degree and no school record for the past 18 months.
Hedge fund director Holloway went completely pale.
Eleanor, stop. She continued anyway, her voice growing louder, filling the room. What he does have is a photographic memory and a mathematical gift that 3 major universities completely missed.
He has been homeless for 6 months,
Taught himself 7 financial structures in a public library, and he is the only reason this hedge fund is surviving today.
Arthur Vance turned his gaze back to Marcus. You taught yourself? No elite tutors?
Yes, sir. At 19, you read maritime shorthand, legacy Panamanian law, and dual-tier bonds?
And quantitative matrix systems, sir.
The federal investigators exchanged quick glances, whispering among themselves. A senior investigator spoke up. Director Vance, our department has a specialized fellowship for exceptional analytical prodigies. The federal government offers full academic scholarships. Eleanor stepped forward protectively, a fierce look in her eyes, like a mother defending her child. With all due respect, West Marcus belongs in New York. We need programs here to support him. He should not have to leave his home or face homelessness just to be valued by this society. Marcus's eyes filled with hot tears. Nobody had fought for him like this since his mother passed away. Arthur Vance walked slowly around the massive table, stopping directly in front of Marcus.
Stand up, young man.
Marcus stood up, trying his best not to shake. If we proceed with this forensic translation as our official legal foundation for the restructuring, I have one non-negotiable condition. The entire room held its breath. Your full name will be listed as the primary forensic translator on all official federal documents, academic records, and international financial archives. Marcus's voice broke completely.
Sir?
At 19, you have accomplished what senior partners twice your age could not touch. That deserves absolute federal recognition.
He extended his hand, formal, official. They shook.
Arthur Vance turned his gaze directly toward the hedge fund director. And you will ensure this young man has proper institutional support, exceptional education, and safe housing, Richard? You have my word, Eleanor interrupted, before Holloway could even speak.
He will never be homeless again.
Sylvia Sterling added from the side, we will provide official federal reference letters for any elite analytical program he applies to in the future.
Julian Vance,
the junior partner, who had doubted Marcus from the very beginning, stood up slowly from his seat. He approached the table, his arrogant expression completely shattered, replaced by a deep look of shame. Marcus, I was completely wrong about you, entirely wrong. I judged your worth by your age and your temporary circumstances instead of your actual ability.
I formally apologize. Marcus did not know what to say to the man.
Thank you. No, thank you, Julian muttered.
You taught me something incredibly important today.
Other senior analysts approached the table one by one, offering their hands, sincere apologies, and professional respect. The silver-haired woman, who had questioned his credibility earlier, spoke softly. I have been in this financial field for 40 years, Marcus.
What you accomplished today is nothing short of remarkable.
Even Chloe, the executive assistant, came over. I am so sorry for this morning, Marcus, for pulling my designer bag away from you, like you were some kind of criminal. She could not even finish her sentence, her eyes filling with guilt. She did not need to finish it. I see you now, she said quietly.
Really see you.
Arthur Vance raised his voice to command the room. Tomorrow morning, we officially sign the restructuring agreement with Marcus Vance's name listed on the primary document.
He looked directly at the hedge fund director.
This is absolutely non-negotiable. Holloway could only nod his head in silent agreement. The federal delegation filed out of the room. Sylvia paused at the heavy door. Marcus, the financial district values genius at any age.
Remember that.
The heavy door closed. Marcus stood in a room full of elite corporate executives who had dismissed him as trash hours ago. Now they saw exactly what Eleanor had seen from the start. A human being worth believing in. The delegation broke for a brief lunch. Marcus found his way back to the quiet courier mailroom. In the basement, empty now, completely still. He stared at the preliminary legal document on the desk. His full name was neatly typed in sharp black ink. Marcus Vance, primary forensic translator. His long finger gently traced the letters on the paper, as if they might completely disappear if he blinked his eyes. Eleanor found him there in the quiet space. She did not announce her presence. She just sat down directly beside him on a plastic chair. Not across from him, but at the exact same level. She did not speak right away. She just sat there, being completely present.
Finally, she broke the silence.
My father was a night janitor at Columbia University. Marcus looked up, completely surprised. He worked the late shifts, she continued, her voice soft. When my mother was very sick, he would bring me to work with him. I would sit in the empty lecture halls and read dense books that wealthy students left behind. Philosophy, corporate law, literature, books. I had absolutely no business understanding at 12 years old. Did you eventually go to Columbia, ma'am?
Eventually, yes,
But first, someone in power had to look past the janitor's uniform and see the daughter. She pulled out her personal phone and showed him an old photo. A young girl, maybe 15, standing proudly next to an older black man in a faded custodian uniform. Both of them were smiling warmly. His name was Samuel, she said, her voice softening. He told me something that night I have never forgotten. He said, Eleanor, they will always see the uniform before they see you.
Prove them wrong every single time. I was 16 when he said that to me.
Your age, almost. Marcus studied the faded photograph intently. The young girl who grew up to become senior partner, Eleanor Sterling. The proud father who believed in her future. You remind me exactly why I do this difficult work, Marcus. I just read chaotic numbers, ma'am. No, she turned to face him fully. You remind these arrogant executives that genius does not arrive with an Ivy League resume, or a specific age requirement, or a permanent street address. Her hand rested gently on his shoulder, not like Julian's brutal grip that morning, not pushing him away from the folders. This touch was light, warm, saying, I see you, I believe in you, I have something important for you, Marcus. She reached into her blazer and pulled out a brand new, laminated library card. His name was printed perfectly across the front.
Mrs. Gable called my office yesterday. Eleanor smiled.
She has been looking for you since the Central Library branch reopened last week. His hands trembled violently as he took the small plastic card. The Advanced Mathematics section has a dozen new forensic accounting books, an anonymous corporate donation. She gave him a small smile.
They are waiting for you, Marcus.
Marcus tried to speak, but he could not. The library card became completely blurred through his tears. And I talked directly to Youth Social Services, she continued. We are setting up an official temporary guardianship. You will have a safe, warm place to stay while we figure out long-term legal arrangements. The hot tears finally came.
Quiet.
Years of holding his broken life together, finally breaking down completely. She did not tell him to be strong. She did not shush him. Instead, she pulled him into a warm, tight hug, his first real human hug in 3 long years. He sobbed quietly into her shoulder, letting go of all the fear, all the freezing nights sleeping on concrete steps, all the times he had been treated as completely invisible. Someone finally cared enough to see him, to fight for him, to give him back the dignity the world had stolen. You are going to be okay, Marcus, she whispered softly. I promise you, you are going to be okay. And for the very first time since his mother passed away, Marcus actually believed it. At precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the executive team gathered back in the main conference room for the final contract review before signing. The federal legal teams, the hedge fund staff, and the international analysts on the video screens were all present. The energy in the room was entirely different now, cautiously optimistic. Then the senior SEC legal expert spoke up, an older man with a gray beard and thick reading glasses. There is a critical discrepancy in the core data. The room froze instantly. The primary currency conversion rate on line 43 is deeply flawed. If this calculation is incorrect, the entire restructuring contract completely fails federal validation. Eleanor Sterling leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. What specific kind of discrepancy, Arthur? The baseline municipal calendar year does not align with the federal fiscal year we require for legal standing under international commerce law. If this conversion is off by even a fraction, 3 major banking institutions lose their claims. $450 million in assets will vanish into federal litigation. Holloway's face went completely white. Dr. Bradford Lowe pulled up historical financial references on his screen, typing frantically in Chicago. We need to verify this against the firm's private archival ledger codex, but that physical book is in deep security storage.
6 hours minimum to retrieve and authenticate the data.
Arthur Vance checked his platinum watch grimly. Our return flight to Washington leaves at 8 o'clock tonight. Without immediate verification of line 43, the federal government cannot sign this settlement. Can we please reschedule for tomorrow morning? Holloway's voice carried absolute desperation. Next month, perhaps, Arthur replied coldly. But the political regulatory window closes entirely this Friday. After that, federal priorities shift. The massive deal was dying right there, in real time. Everything Marcus had accomplished, Eleanor's corporate reputation, and the firm's survival were all collapsing into nothingness. Marcus's voice came out small but incredibly clear from the end of the table. What if I verify the municipal conversion numbers right now?
Every single head turned toward him instantly.
The archival ledger codex, I read it cover to cover 2 years ago when it was on public display in the city library basement. Julian Vance stood up abruptly, his chair scraping. Marcus, that codex contains over 400 pages of dense, encrypted historical calendrical tables.
I know, you were 16 years old. I know, you are seriously saying you remember it, all of it.
Sylvia Sterling, the chief SEC accountant, leaned forward with intense curiosity.
You possess complete photographic recall?
Marcus nodded his head slowly. Holloway shook his head in absolute disbelief. Eleanor, this is far too risky for the firm. We cannot stake our entire corporate survival on a street kid's memory of a book he read 2 years ago in a library. Arthur Vance's booming voice cut through the rising panic. Young man, if you are wrong, this restructuring agreement fails permanently. Years of complex diplomatic and financial work will be completely wasted. I understand the consequences perfectly, sir. The immense pressure on a 19-year-old was staggering. This isn't fair to ask of you, son, Eleanor whispered, touching his arm gently. Marcus, are you absolutely certain? It is okay to say no.
His voice steadied as he looked at her.
Nothing about my life has been fair, Mom. But this calculation, this is something I can do.
I remember the exact conversion tables from the text. Let me try.
Eleanor looked into his eyes, saw the absolute determination, and nodded.
Do it.
The executives immediately rearranged the room, placing Marcus at the absolute head of the table. 20 powerful people watched him, waiting. He closed his eyes completely. The entire room held its breath. An absolute silence fell, broken only by the low hum of the fluorescent lights, someone's expensive watch ticking, and the distant traffic below on the streets of Manhattan. Marcus's long fingers began to trace patterns slowly in the air, as if he were reading invisible lines of text. His face showed intense concentration, his eyes moving rapidly under his closed lids. He was seeing it clearly in his mind.
The exact page.
Faded, ink-stained, as clear as the day he had first read it. Sweat formed on his forehead despite the cool, air-conditioned room.
Page 247.
His voice sounded distant, certain. Third column. His eyes stayed closed, his fingers still moving in the air.
The historical table
Converts municipal calendar year 1050 to fiscal year 1994. He opened his eyes, blinked, and looked around the room like waking from a heavy dream. The contract date matches perfectly.
It is entirely valid.
Eleanor grabbed the conference phone instantly. Archives, this is senior partner Eleanor Sterling.
Authorization code Alpha 7.
Pull the historical ledger codex data immediately. Page 247, third column. I need verbal confirmation in exactly 1 hour.
The archive supervisor's voice crackled through the speaker.
Director Sterling, that is a 6-hour security process. Make it 1 hour.
The survival of this firm depends on it.
She hung up the phone with a sharp click.
Now they waited.
60 minutes stretched out like long days. People made desperate small talk, filled with nervous energy, but nobody was really listening to anyone else. Marcus sat completely apart from the executives, second-guessing his own mind. What if his photographic memory had failed him for the first time?
What if he had mixed up the pages?
What if he had just destroyed Eleanor's entire career? Sylvia Sterling approached him quietly, sitting down in the empty chair beside him. How many reference books have you memorized, Marcus? I don't know, ma'am. I don't try to memorize them. It just stays. Have you ever been formally tested for this?
No, ma'am. No one to take me. No health insurance.
She exchanged a deep look with Arthur Vance across the room. Something profound passed between them, a look of understanding and recognition. Marcus, regardless of what happens with the archives today, you possess an extraordinary human gift.
What if I am wrong, ma'am? Then you are wrong.
But you were brave enough to stand up and try when everyone else was paralyzed.
45 minutes passed.
The conference room felt smaller, hotter. Julian paced the floor. Holloway checked his phone every 30 seconds. Dr. Bradford Lowe stared at his monitor from Chicago. 58 minutes. The conference phone rang loudly. Eleanor grabbed it, instantly putting it on speakerphone. The archivist's voice came through, slightly breathless. Page 247, third column confirmed. Municipal calendar year 1050 corresponds perfectly to fiscal year 1994.
The child was absolutely correct.
The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped in pure relief, absolute disbelief, and amazement.
Marcus dropped his head into his hands.
Arthur Vance stood up, walked deliberately over to Marcus, and extended his hand. Young man, you have one of the most remarkable analytical minds I have ever encountered, and I have taught finance across 2 continents. They shook hands firmly. Have you ever considered advanced academic study under federal sponsorship, Marcus? Arthur Vance asked, his eyes filled with immense respect. The government has specialized training programs, full scholarships, housing, and career placement. Eleanor Sterling stepped in immediately, gentle but firm. He has exceptional options right here in New York, Arthur.
I will personally make certain of that.
Arthur Vance nodded slowly, real respect in his eyes.
Then America is incredibly fortunate to have him.
The federal delegation gathered their legal materials, preparing to leave the 44th floor, promising to return for the formal signing ceremony the following morning.
But Marcus could not stay in that boardroom any longer.
The heavy adrenaline draining from his body left him shaking violently, completely empty of energy. He excused himself quietly and found his way to the private archives on the 35th floor, the quiet space he had walked past dozens of times when he was just an invisible courier. He sat down directly on the floor, his back pressed against the mahogany paneling beneath a historic bronze plaque of the firm's founding principles. The hot tears came fast, A mixture of pure relief, absolute exhaustion, and a terrifying fear he had been holding inside for hours. "I could have been completely wrong," he whispered into the empty room. "I could have easily ruined Eleanor's entire career."
Chloe found him there in the dim light.
The executive assistant who had actively avoided him that morning did not ask for permission to enter. She just sat down directly beside him on the floor, mirroring his position with her back against the wall. They sat in absolute silence for a long moment. "I am so sorry, Marcus." Her voice was quiet, trembling. "For this morning, for pulling my designer bag away from you, like you were something dangerous, like you were trash." "I see you now," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "Really see you for who you are, and I am so deeply sorry I didn't before." Marcus nodded his head, slowly, unable to speak through his own tears. She pulled a protein bar and a small bottle of juice from her purse, placing them in his hands. "You haven't eaten a single thing all day, Marcus. You are still a teenager. You need to eat." A small human kindness, but it had a massive impact on his soul.
He took the food, whispering a quiet thank you.
They sat together on the floor, two people who had started the morning on opposite sides of a rigid social wall, both learning something profound about seeing past superficial surfaces. Above them, the bronze plaque stood silent, an ancient witness to a modern moment of human grace. At exactly 6 o'clock in the evening, the grand lobby of the skyscraper transformed into a sea of media lights. Marble columns rose 30 feet into the air, and crystal chandeliers caught the evening light. This historic room had hosted global CEOs and international trade delegations. Tonight, it hosted a 19-year-old homeless boy. Press filled the back rows, cameras flashing rapidly, with reporters from the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg. This was no longer just an internal corporate audit, it was breaking international news. The massive signing table sat on a raised wooden platform, ornate, historic, usually reserved for multi-billion-dollar mergers. Marcus stood to the side, adjusting the blazer Eleanor had bought him, the price tag still tucked neatly inside. She had purchased it during lunch without even asking his size. She just knew. It fit his thin frame perfectly. Managing Director Holloway, the federal delegation, and legal teams from 3 separate institutions took their designated seats at the table. Cameras flashed aggressively, and reporters murmured rapidly into their microphones. Arthur Vance raised his hand for silence. "Before we officially sign this restructuring agreement, there is one critical correction to the legal document." Concern rippled through the corporate crowd instantly. Not another error. He pointed directly to the byline, the official forensic credit lines. "This currently lists only our institutional analysts, Dr. Bradford Lowe, Sylvia Sterling, and our respective federal teams." He looked directly at Marcus. "I insist we add primary forensic translation and verification by Marcus Vance, independent scholar." The room went dead still, then applause broke out. Scattered at first, then building into a roaring wave of public, permanent recognition. His full name was being entered into the official federal record. Holloway had absolutely no choice but to agree, not with international cameras rolling, not with federal witnesses watching his every move. "Agreed," Holloway muttered. An assistant brought the amended contract, printed fresh and notarized on the spot. There, in sharp black ink, official and real. Primary forensic translation and verification by Marcus Vance, independent scholar. The formal signing proceeded, pens moving across paper, handshakes exchanged under the bright flashes of light. Then the press questions began. A reporter from the New York Times called out, "Senior Partner Sterling, can you speak to your team's specific methodology?" Eleanor stepped directly to the microphone, her voice steady and unyielding. "I can speak to what happens when our society almost misses human genius because it does not arrive in the expected package." She told his story to the world. 19 years old, homeless since 16, entirely self-taught in a public library. dismissed repeatedly by guards and executives alike. Marcus out-analyzed financial experts with decades of experience and elite degrees, not despite his circumstances, but because his mind simply works at a level most of us cannot comprehend. She paused, letting the heavy truth land in the room. And we almost threw him out of this building like trash this morning. The room shifted uncomfortably, a raw truth, spoken aloud in a space built on appearances. A Bloomberg reporter called out, "Can we hear directly from Marcus?" Every single camera turned instantly toward the side of the stage. Microphone bones extended like a mechanical wall as Marcus approached the podium like a man walking toward a steep cliff. Terrified, shaking. The heavy metal microphone stood far too tall for him. Someone from the media crew quickly adjusted it down for a teenager. "What do you want the world to know, Marcus?" His mouth went completely dry as his hands trembled against the wood. This morning, he had been completely invisible to the city. Now, the entire world was watching him. Eleanor Sterling nodded with quiet encouragement from the side of the stage. He found his voice, small, cracking, but completely honest. "The public library saved my human life." The words came slowly, heavy with emotion. "Books were my only family when I had absolutely no one left in this world. And Eleanor believed my words when everyone else just saw a dangerous problem to remove from the lobby." He pointed directly to her, hot tears filling his eyes. "She saw my humanity, really saw me." His voice broke completely under the lights, but he pushed through the pain. "So, if there is a kid sitting on skyscraper steps tomorrow, or inside a library, or anywhere at all, please just see them." The media room went absolutely silent, phones recording, cameras capturing the raw, unfiltered truth from a child. Another reporter called out, "What is next for you, Marcus?" Marcus's face showed an honest, deep confusion. "I don't know. I have never been able to think about next. I just tried to survive each day on the streets." Arthur Vance stood up from his seat, approaching the microphone slowly. "Perhaps I can help answer that question for the world." After the press left the building, Eleanor brought Marcus up to her private office. Holloway was already waiting there. His arrogant expression was completely changed from this morning, chastened, deeply respectful. "Marcus." The corporate board held an emergency meeting during the signing ceremony. Marcus's stomach dropped instantly, expecting heavy consequences, expecting everything to be taken away from him. They have officially created a permanent position, Youth Financial Analyst in Residence, the first of its kind in this firm. "It is fully yours if you want it." Marcus could not process the words. "I don't have anywhere to live, sir." Holloway interrupted, actually apologetic. "The position includes a premium housing stipend, full health insurance, educational support, and everything you need." Eleanor continued, her voice warm. "And I have been officially approved as your temporary legal guardian until we find a permanent placement, or until you turn 21, if you will have me." The entire room spun around him. "Arthur Vance also connected me directly with Columbia University's finance department. They are offering you a full, unrestricted academic scholarship. It starts the exact moment you are ready for university. But first, we are going to help you finish your high school education properly." She leaned forward, making sure he heard every single syllable. "You are not homeless anymore, Marcus. Not unless you choose to be." He could not speak. He could barely breathe. She opened her polished desk drawer, pulling out something official and laminated. A corporate security ID badge. It had his photo from this afternoon, his first official picture in 3 long years. Name, Marcus Vance. Title, Youth Analyst in Residence, Security Clearance, Forensic Research Staff. He took the plastic card with both hands like holding something sacred, fragile. He traced his name with one finger. "Is this real, ma'am? I am not dreaming this." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "This is real, Marcus. This is earned. This is yours." He clutched the security badge tightly to his chest, his shoulders shaking as he broke down completely. "Thank you. Words are completely inadequate, insufficient. Thank you. The federal delegation waited in the Marble Hall for their final goodbyes before their flight back to Washington. Arthur Vance shook Marcus's hand once more. When you are older, visit Washington as a formal scholar. Our forensic archives await your mind.
Sylvia Sterling gave him her card.
Call my office when you do. We will explore the matrix systems together, colleague to colleague. That word again, colleague. Even Julian Vance approached, the junior partner who had doubted him from the start. Marcus, I judged you by your age and circumstances instead of your actual human ability, and that was deeply wrong of me.
He extended his hand in peace.
Thank you for teaching me something I should have already known. They shook hands. Marcus gracious beyond his years. Thank you for saying that, sir. No. Thank you for being brave enough to show up today. Late in the evening, the grand building was closing, security making their final rounds. Webb, the security guard from that morning, found Marcus sitting at a desk in the archive lab, reading under a single lamp, surrounded by complex texts. Webb stopped dead in the doorway, remembering his brutal hands on the kid's shoulders, the harsh dismissal, the cruel assumptions. He slowly removed his security cap. I owe you a formal apology, son. Marcus looked up from his page. You were just doing your job, sir. No. Webb stepped inside the room. I was making cruel assumptions, and that is not my job. That is just prejudice wearing a uniform.
He extended his rough hand. Welcome to the firm, Mr. Vance.
They shook hands, formal, respectful, Marcus's badge clipped to his shirt, catching the warm lamplight.
Proof this was not a dream.
Webb left the room quietly. Marcus returned to his book. Marcus's story isn't just about one brilliant mathematical mind being discovered in a crisis. It's about how many human minds we actively miss while they are standing right in front of us. Invisible because they are young, because they are homeless, because they do not look like what we expect genius to look like. Right now, today, there is a brilliant child sitting on skyscraper steps, in a library, or on a freezing subway platform, waiting, hoping. Eleanor saw it on the steps, Sylvia saw it in a matrix, Arthur saw it in a verification. What will you see today?
Who will you see today?
If this story moved your heart, share it. Tag someone who needs to hear that their current circumstances do not define their human worth. Comment below, when were you underestimated because of how you looked? Your next discovery might be the person you almost didn't see. Genius doesn't need credentials, just someone brave enough to look past the uniform.